And today will be the setting of the context of Exodus chapters 1 through technically 11. Peace, blessings to you, Brother Zamila. You have a key on you? He may have it. Okay, well, we lock that door behind. Coming through the back. And again, I believe it's important to set that historical background on the children of Israel and where they are. Oh, thanks, Conrad. So we can get an idea on the call of Israel. Now, if you recall, before I get started, Acts chapter 15. We would like to begin there or explain why we're doing what we're doing. In Acts, the 15th chapter, verse 21 reads, "And Moses, for Moses of old time hath in every city them that preach him, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath day." So we are continuing that order of things. Now, it's something that the Messiah said in Matthew I believe I'm on Matthew chapter 5. And I want to read this here so we can take this into consideration. Or do I want 7? Bear with me a second. Bear with me. I want us to look at this carefully, or take this into consideration, and think about it. Here in Matthew, hold on one second. Let me get the chapter here. Yeah, it is Matthew 5. Verse 20. Matthew 5 and 20. It reads, "For I say unto you, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. Except our righteousness exceed the righteousness of the scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees, we shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. Now, you could probably ask 10 different people, what does it mean? And you'll probably get 10 different answers. And if you ask me, I'll probably make 11. I'll give you another answer.
Okay.
And so what happens is that whoever give their answers, you just pretty much have to, what the Bible say, make full proof of the ministry best you can to get an idea where he's what he's arguing. Now, what's being brought to the table if we continue in Matthew and we go over to Matthew chapter 23. And in Matthew chapter 23, it reads in verse 1. Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do, but do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. Now there were certain things that they wasn't doing, but there were certain things that they were doing. In verse 5 it says, but all their works they do, for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garments. So the phylacteries, they argue, were the little ornaments that will have the book of the law written on it, you know, where they were put on their heads. They argue that this is what was being made reference to. The borders of the garments are the fringes. They love verse 6, they love the uppermost rooms at feasts and chief seats in the synagogues. So this implies that they were keeping the feast days and Sabbaths. And greetings in the markets, to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. Now he also says, I want to skip down a little bit more. He says in verse 13, but woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, ye hypocrites, for ye shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. For ye neither go in yourselves, neither suffer ye them that are entering to go in. And then he says in verse 21, to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye devour widow houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. Now he gave an example in Luke how they were devouring widow houses. But they do say their prayers. They wear fringes, phylacteries. And then he argues, if we go down a little further, 23, they keep the feast days, of course. But he says, woe unto you scribes, in verse 23, and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ought ye to have done, and to not leave the other undone. So yes, it was good that you did all these other things, but it was certain things you were missing. Now the context of the scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees was set when he said they sit in Moses' seat. They were the interpreters of the law. Scribes were the writers and interpreters, but they were in coalition with the chieftains. the Pharisees as well. And the chieftains were the Sadducees. So what do you have in the proper context of what we're reading? Is that the scribes describes itself, you may hear me say it, they are the intelligentsia. You have this is the educated class. Normally the educated class are in association with the upper class. The Pharisees range from the middle to upper high. Okay? Meaning from the middle class to the upper higher class. If some will argue there wasn't a middle class, but I mean they wasn't totally poor, but they wasn't a part of the actual rich either. Now, they were part of the Sadducees. Now, the Sadducees were the upper class. They were the ones who the Romans gave a lot of authority to. And this was and they did this because when they dismantled Israel from the Hasmonean dynasty, and the Hasmonean dynasty in which the Sadducees derived from, they broke up that dynasty, but they placed the head of the chieftains of foreign occupation who were converts, which were the Idumeans, more specifically Herod, which was an Idumean. But nevertheless, between those families, the Sadducee and an Idumean family, these were the friends of Caesar, or this was among these families in whom the imperial powers chose to put in power in their colonized country for reasons of exploitation and robbery. And that might be strange to talk about this at a Bible study. But I'm bringing that part out is because the Pharisees, Sadducees obviously kept the feast days. They said their prayers. They wore their fringes. They wore the phylacteries. They even paid tithes. So we read in Matthew chapter 5, however, their righteousness didn't exceed. So the students of the Messiah was told, unless our righteousness exceed theirs, we shall in no wise inherit the kingdom of heaven. Now, in Exodus, we're looking at the kingdom of heaven, the foundations of the kingdom of heaven. Now, why? Why is it that our righteousness had to exceed the righteousness of the scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees? And along with asking why, to answer that question, it is of primary importance to find out how far their righteousness went. If you're going to exceed it, you got to see where it stopped. Now, the reason why I like to bring this stuff to the table is because of the doctrine that I was given growing up and learning. Or should I say the doctrine I ran into? The doctrine I was given was the entire Bible. That was what I was given. But then through the process of time and looking for someone to be associated with, I ran into a group of men and women who had an organization in which they taught the truth. But then after years, almost 10 years, you move forward. And I began to learn, well, what was the truth in which was given to me? And when I began to compare the truth, which they say was the truth, which was given to me, I started to compare it when I began to analyze this text to the scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees. And the conclusion I've come to today, I don't know what it'll be tomorrow, but the conclusion I've come to today is that it didn't exceed it. In fact, it was almost identical. Feast days, Sabbath days, prayers, not eating pork. Sadducees and Pharisees didn't have to teach who Israel was. All of a sudden, we turned that into doctrine. And I was guilty of that for a minute. That has been turned into doctrine. In some places, that is people's primary doctrine. But that isn't what the scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees had to teach, nor is it what the Messiah and his disciples had to teach. So we set that in the miscellaneous, that doctrine. the miscellaneous area, because they didn't have to teach that. So in essence, what I'm saying is that the scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees, when I began to mount it and to compare it to the doctrine which I was given, it didn't exceed it. It didn't exceed what the scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees taught. And that made me concerned. So when he said that what you do, and your doctrines, and what you do observe in your prayers and your feasts, and your love to dress and raiments, and collecting of and giving of tithes, and all of that, he said, you still shut up the kingdom of heaven to men. He said, you still shut it up. But I was told that is my entrance into the kingdom of heaven, because I didn't get much more outside. Maybe I'm missing something, and I'm not being sarcastic. But if someone could think of something else in their own experiences in Hebrewism, it's the don't eat pork. Some places say wear fringes, some say don't, but fringes, let's say. Keep the feast days, keep the Sabbath days. Some say Yeshua, some don't, so we say that. But in the doctrines themselves, prayers, songs, that's added. We know that. That's what the Bible. All right.
Oh, and you got to teach the nations that they got to do that too.
And you have to teach the nations that you have to just do what I just named.
Yeah, everything you just named.
Everything I just named. The nations got to do it too.
The nations got to do it too.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm not being sarcastic. No. I'm literally just trying to. Is there anything else that you're giving outside of that? Now, I had it back in the days when I was arguing fringes, when I was under a certain school, and I was wearing fringes, and some of the teachers didn't like it. Well, probably majority of the teachers didn't like it, but I got into a discourse with the same group, but they were out of town. The teacher was out of town. And while we're discussing fringes, they threw at me other laws, the agricultural laws. And they said, well, see, you don't have to keep these now. And I remember that distinctly, because during this time, we had just left this organization, and we was getting into agriculture. And so the idea of not muzzling the ox while he tread the corn, the idea of agriculture. I mean, they named a few agricultural laws because they went outside the Levitical law, because we agreed, well, sacrifice of animals, Daniel did away with that. So we was all in agreement with that. So they threw the agricultural law. And I remember replying and saying, yeah, these laws are still good, but they're applied to where you need them. But in their minds, they wasn't any good. So in other words, I'm saying outside of what I just previously named, they don't give you much more outside of that. But everything they name is what the scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees did. And I'm here to argue, as disappointing as it may be, I look around. Chicago is the Mecca of Israelites.
Is it?
That's where they all are.
I cannot know.
The next one you can argue is New York. But New York was concentrated among Abba Bivens and the New York group, One West. But in Chicago, you had the reign from Ben Amin and all of the teachers that came out of him. Eliyahu Bowie was Ben Amin teacher. You had a different range of Israelites that really began to set up in Chicago. They all didn't originate in Chicago, but they really set up in Chicago. What does Chicago look like today? It's a war zone. What's happening to the Israelites in Chicago? So-called Israelites. Maybe that the kingdom of heaven been shut up. See, the kingdom of heaven has been shut up. Not just in Chicago, but in the teachings. So if we're going back here to Exodus, it is very important to realize why they're at this threshold. Meaning, one thing that they have grown into a multitude of people. Hundreds of thousands. And if all we can derive out of Exodus is what we receive today in the name of God, for the most part, we in trouble. Not those who can understand more and their righteousness will exceed the righteousness of the Sadducees and Pharisees. I'm talking about those who are not even aware that their righteousness do not exceed it. And for a long time, I just simply wasn't aware of it. Now, like I say, whether I'm right or wrong, maybe their righteousness do exceed it, but I don't know what it is. I don't know. Now, people say, see, but then there's another part before I go further. This righteousness, you say, unless my righteousness exceed the righteousness of the scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees, we have the tendency to make it internal. You know, we get this, like, how we feel within ourselves about how we think we feel towards our brother. And the Sadducees, you know, they didn't love their brother, but I love my brother. See, we make it internal. But the way it is, the test of time, the test of history, this internal righteousness or this internal love that men say that they have, it's always demonstrated outwardly. And that outward demonstration was put to the test by Jesus of Nazareth, or Yeshua of Nazareth. Came to the rich man and said, look, what do you tell the rich man? Everybody know that. Okay, you say you kept all the commandments since your youth. All right, this is what you lacking. Zacchaeus, another Israelite, here, this is what you're lacking. So what we find is that the Messiah put it all to the test. That the kingdom of God and the love of the people in the kingdom of God creates heaven. And the social economic conditions which prevail around you is the test to see whether you're doing what you're supposed to do or not. That is the test. That's the litmus test. That's how you can gauge, in other words. Now, it's one thing, we see what people around you are wicked. Have they heard? Because you can't really determine what they would do unless you tell them. You just can't rap about it. They don't want to listen. They don't want to hear. You don't know yet. Got to find out. So what we have here in Exodus, now he said our righteousness got to exceed that. Now what we have here, I want to set the context of what's going on here. Because they said they set Moses' seat. Now what was Moses supposed to do? Now we in Exodus chapter 2, one thing I want you to keep in mind, do you all remember in Exodus chapter 1 though, do you remember this comparison and what they said is a part of the social, it's a part of the social economic structure. And what I mean is this, in Exodus, the first chapter, we find something being described in verse 11. It says, therefore they did set over them, Exodus 1 and verse 11. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters, whatever you want to call them, supervisors, bosses, CEOs, whatever you want to call them. Those who looked over and the administrators over you to put you to work in your occupations and your tasks, whatever it is. Okay. To afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom, and Ramses. Everybody remember the science behind that. If there is an accumulation of wealth at one pole, this is is not a mistake. It's always the same everywhere you go. Wherever there's an equitable distribution of the wealth, at one pole, what's at the other pole? Everybody, poverty, misery. So Exodus chapter 1:11 sets the stage. And this is what is being described when he talks about them being grieved or lives made bitter with bondage and mortar and brick and all manner of service in the fields. Sets the stage. Now, what was Moses to come to do? Now, if we go to Exodus chapter 2, verse 1. And there, starting at verse 1. And there went a man of the house of Levi and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him, that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. Why? Because Exodus chapter 1 tells us that there was a national decree to kill all the firstborn babies. But we had civil disobedience, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
That civil disobedience, and to understand what these two women represented, the resistance against unjust law. And who were they? They were the midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. It's interesting that the women, they were used to have resistance against the decrees of the government. So people say, well, you better you know obey the law. You do if it's within reason. That's why I would tell people, you do it if it's within reason. But there is unjust law that should be resisted. And they did. They broke the law to save the children. And because they broke the law, what did the Creator do? He said, I will build your houses. Why? Because they stood for what was just. And it isn't a coincidence that you always have that element in society that have a conscience. And because they stood for justice, the Creator used them to make way for a man to be born. Moses. Okay. And he's going to continue this demonstration that these women have shown among the Hebrew babies, or this demonstration that these women have shown to have this courage to resist national law. Now we're going to have another one. Now his mother, she bore a child. She bare a son, and when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and she laid in the flags by the river banks. Didn't mention the midwives there though, did it? It's probably likely they were there though. It probably wasn't just Shiphrah and Puah, probably was more than that, probably. But nevertheless, I don't think she had the baby by herself. Some women do, but I don't think that it's a good chance she probably didn't. Nevertheless, this baby made it. Hit him in a bulrush. All right, now, verse 6, and when she had opened it, I'm sorry. Verse 4, and his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done of him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river. And her maidens walked along by the riverside, and when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept, and she had compassion on him, and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Now, what is this showing us again? Now, the reason I want to bring this stuff out is because I have been talking in a couple of weeks past or sometime. You have you have whistleblowers. You have dissension inside of the ruling class. That's what you have. All right. And here's another demonstration. Now, she's Pharaoh's daughter. She know that baby supposed to be put to death. But she didn't put him to death. Did she go against the decrees of the elite?
Yep.
Most High moved her heart, did. See, people would do the right thing if they presented with the evidence sometime, or they presented in those situations. Not everybody, but all you need is enough. See, that's what I've come to to the conclusion. You don't need everybody. You just need enough people. Just enough. God knows who's enough. You don't need everybody though. And when you see, and when you're looking at these, the right people with that right heart, she had compassion on the baby. She knew this was the baby of the Hebrews. And then verse 7, it said, then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. Now how that work? You mean to tell me that the very one who will undermine this entire civilization and bereave it of its workforce, or nice part of its workforce, a decree went out to have all male children killed, that is going to be the elite themselves who's going to support and build this child and even educate him. Well, then, that's a further proof that who truly rules in the kingdom of men. And that's why when we begin to understand what it means to open up the gates of heaven and no longer shut the gates of heaven like the scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees, when the people in the Bible demonstrate to us the works of God, and we begin to learn the works of God, and we can rehearse and remember some of these things, that when we understand our real task at hand, we can have courage. We can have courage. Because what the Messiah had brought to the table, he said, what I do, you shall do. But then we read throughout history, we have women rising up, resisting the elite order. We have among the elite themselves, you have some with a conscience that will help further your movements, because that's what just happened. The Creator put this in place to this very day. Like I've been talking to brothers and sisters, we've been going on the feed. It's about 2 weeks now because I haven't been able to have access to a computer, so I've been using the text. And so if you've been on this feed, because you only could put so many people on it. But if you notice, we've been arguing, or argument presented that why is it that Donald Trump has been so demonized since he's been in office? People don't know nothing about politics, would irritate me when I walk past, oh, Trump this, Trump that. I mean, I've been hearing it for years. I tell people all the time from day one, if I'm mistaken, if I told anybody any different, I am against Trump because he's a capitalist. And all capitalists are enemies to the kingdom.
Okay.
However, in the art of war, if your enemy is an enemy to another of your enemies, then maybe the enemy of your enemy could be your friend. Right. So I'll begin to ask these questions. Why is it then? Now this ties into the kingdom. This ties into this work of the kingdom. I'll argue the sentiment that I'm expressing. Why is it that everywhere you look that they always demonize Trump? Like I said, I got a kick out of him. And I didn't take everything he said serious, and some things they said was racist. I didn't really consider it racist. Some of the things he was saying just actually the truth. And I actually got into another discussion yesterday where people didn't understand. A couple of brothers didn't understand. They were older than me. They didn't understand why I had this view. I said, listen, we can no longer be hypocrites. If you're going to roast the white man about calling you all thugs and criminals, how can you in the same breath turn around and say they all racist? White men this, white men that, or they're all privileged. That was particularly our conversation. How can you say all of them privileged? Because, they got more rights. That's like them saying all of us are thugs. You have a person been raised in a so-called black community, and mother and father there, he's been educated, he'd get upset. White people just consider him a thug, follow him around the store. But then you have a white person come from the hills of West Virginia. Ever since he knew his family been poor, he can't find a job, he's unemployed, his sister, his cousins, his mother, they on opioids. and they talking, and he walked past and gets people screaming about how much privilege he got. He want to look at you, what the heck? What y'all talking about? I don't have privilege. I have to work hard. I live in trailer camps. I can't find a job. I'm unemployed. I sleep in the car. You say privilege? So what's happening here was the media.
Right.
And I began to understand that the billionaires, especially one I've been focusing on for some time, for lately, is this man, Bill Gates, and his associates. I'm coming to find it's not just him alone. He has these other associates, white and black. And what I began to learn is that how much money he funds in certain broadcasts. And I come to find out, brother posted some stuff, put it online. Only broadcast he really don't have much to do with is Fox News, I found out. Brother told me. And then brother or comrade Nishan was he been posting some stuff. Hopefully he'll have this thing together for us to make reference to, so we can understand the concentration of wealth and who owns what.
Okay.
So what we have is this. He said, if you notice, Fox News don't talk bad about Trump as much. I don't know that because I don't really listen to none of it. As far as I take another route, but they don't. So I made mention about it yesterday. And other people who listen to it, they acknowledge it. He said, you're right. Fox really don't talk too much about Trump. The idea of Trump being a racist and make America great again, mean to make America white again. Y'all know who that came from? Who started that dogma? That's what Trump meant. From what I gather, some argue Nancy Pelosi. See, when Trump said make America great again, I didn't think about white or black because he's an industrialist, so I'm thinking about money making. But somebody made it seem like it's race. And now, what do they have? I come to find out that the Democrats is pushing this race bait thing, got everybody at one another's necks, because this is what may happen. And I went through all that to explain something. Sometimes your enemy, you know that it all come back to you through the years. I remember when this guy was first being elected. I'm gonna get back to the law reading. Just hold on a minute. We ain't gonna do this one chapter. When I went back, I remember my mother explaining, one thing she liked about Trump is that he was against abortions. That was a plus. And a lot of babies getting, especially black babies, killed. Like Black Lives Matter, they should be in front of abortion clinics, shouldn't they?
That's right.
After you leave the police station, why don't you march down to the abortion clinic?
Hallelujah.
But nevertheless, I didn't know where to place that. Then I found in 2017, I seen a clip of Bill Gates' wife, Melinda Gates, upset because Trump didn't want to fund abortion. I just found out reading. I didn't put it together. I just see, okay. So now I'm learning that that the Gates Foundation, they are the seed of the eugenics movement.
Right.
That's where he comes from. And he's been in Africa and India trying to implement the eugenics program, period. That's just readily known. And they say it, they come right out and say, they can't have as many babies. All right. Population control under Planned Parenting. You understand? That's how they say. They don't say eugenics anymore. It's Planned Parenting. So upset. Now, what I'm going to say is, brothers and sisters, you know what? Now he want to push the mandatory vaccine. Bill Gates, and he's trying to get all of the countries. He want to vaccinate the world. But I'm reading stuff. Bill Gates really not that smart though. He's really not a genius. He isn't. People is coming all out in the woodwork. He did not find Microsoft. He did not create that software. They have interviews when they're asking him about economic history. He admittedly said he don't really know much about it. He just fell into some money. So it looks like he has some type of intelligence and power. But if you read his body language while people are asking him questions, he really isn't that smart. Yeah, but nevertheless, brothers and sisters, if Biden get in office, or if the Democrats take the seats, they'll probably let Bill Gates do whatever he want to do.
That's why he just.
Now, what we have is now they're making Trump look bad again. Because someone sent me a clip where Bill Gates was trying to mock Trump. And now what I've learned about Bill Gates, I couldn't even finish watching the video because Bill Gates trying to make Trump look stupid. But I understand now about you, Gates, you just, he never answered the question about Kennedy talking about the vaccines, he just went about making Trump look bad. Now another piece come together. Well, is it him behind the media? Everywhere you turn, that Trump making look like a racist. I'm not saying Trump's an angel, but what's behind the media making him look like he do? Why are you trying to get the public opinion and get him out? He don't want to fund. He want to put World Health Organization under scrutiny. He also he's just passed the bill to slash pharmaceuticals because he said by 50%. Not that I'm for pharmaceuticals, but now why are you? What's happening here? So now there is a war between capitalists because Donald Trump represents another kind of capitalist. He represents this capitalist that's actually being hurt by the coronavirus. Hotels and all that shit, cruising, people ain't traveling, ain't going to his businesses. You understand? So you can say that's probably part of his motivation, but it don't matter. Whatever it is, if his agenda at this moment in time will benefit us and buy us time, we need to consider some things. Now, if Biden get in office, he's bound to give, just like I seen Biden and Obama, they were giving Trump and Melinda Gates and Gates hugs and everything else. In other words, if he get in office, the Democrat get in office, and they give Bill Gates leeway over the people, it's gonna be some trouble. Unless people just don't mind getting stuck. They don't mind it. Because it could come down to that point. Well, listen here, you want to get back to work, you're gonna have to take this here. See, I don't mind wearing a mask. It don't make me no different. People filthy anyway. You passing around a bunch of nonsense, eating swine's flesh and everything else. It don't matter. I don't mind wearing a mask. I used to wear one all the time at work. But what we see on the horizon now, that Trump, we might want him back in office by sometimes. And they mad too. They mad because he want to put their vaccines under investigation. They upset because he said he don't believe that the American people should be forced to take vaccines. They mad. And everywhere you look, it's a campaign to make him look stupid or racist. So what's in the wind? Trump promoting racism. Trump is causing a division. The Confederate flags being taken down and all. They're promoting racism. The news are promoting racism. The Democrats are promoting it. And they putting it all on Trump. Because they want him out. And once he's out, then they can have free range at us. And they eating it up. You're right. They eating it up. Now, what I'm saying is that we have to consider our position and to have courage. We see here in Exodus, people who stood to have courage. But it went a step further. Now we have Moses have been born. And he's being raised in Pharaoh's house. And I'm saying all of this to say, all of the politics I just talked about, sometimes it takes time for us to merge all this together because what we are taught in religion, normally they are separate. That they normally don't even fit in the same conversation. So now it's time to exercise the mind to understand how all of this works together, to synthesize it all together is how we begin to see the greater picture. And I believe at that same time, we begin to understand our role in the work of the kingdom of God. Because what we see here, Moses was sent forth to build the kingdom of God. And actually, he was being set up and the people were being groomed to go remove rich men like Bill and Melinda Gates, even like Trump and Bezos and the rest of them. People say they don't believe that. Give us some time. You forget that's why Israel was called. Now look, they built treasure cities and God not going to forget that part. Now Pharaoh's being, now all of the funding that Moses' ancestors had contributed to the house of Pharaoh, a portion of that funding is going to educate and feed this baby. Now it says here, verse 8, Pharaoh's daughter said to her gold, and the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, take this child away and nurse it for me. And I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. So see how it started to come back. all that treasure cities and everything that Pharaoh got rich off of, God gonna use them riches to go ahead and take care of Moses. And you're gonna feed this child because he's gonna undermine this entire society. Moses' seed undermined the entire Egyptian society. The scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees sat in whose seat? They sat in Moses' seat. Did their religion undermine the Roman society?
No.
It didn't, did it? Moses' seat did. Now look at this. It says, and the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, because I drew him out of the water. And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens. And he spied an Egyptian smiting in Hebrew, one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that way. And when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Okay, so we see another burden. We got to understand something now with Moses, because what we're about to read in the coming chapters, this is setting this foundation a little bit here. So we see there's an harmony among the Hebrews. There's an harmony. There isn't any harmony. Okay? But yet there isn't any harmony among the elitists either. I don't care whatever. See, Pharaoh's daughter broke the harmony. See, if she was in harmony with the elitists, she would have said, kill that baby. There isn't harmony. You have to seize advantage of it. Now, in certain sense, you got to seize advantage of the dissension. And then we also have, but we have another hurdle where we have to also work through our own dissensions for the sake of the movement itself. Now, Moses, he see two Hebrews fighting. So the Bible letting us know, listen, don't get a misunderstanding now. It wasn't all good with the Hebrews. They were fighting, and not only that, when he hit him in the sand, verse 13 says, and when he went out the second day, behold, two men of the Hebrews strove together, right? And he said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? Again, he go out now. Wait a minute. I went ahead of myself. The dissension I'm talking about between the Hebrews is here. Right here, I'm talking about, I meant to talk about the Egyptian, the foreigner, who brutalized the Hebrew. Excuse me, I went ahead of myself. And Moses hid him in the sand. All right, so now we see the dissension among the Hebrews in verse 13. And he arguing, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And what is the reply? And he said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killedest the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. So now you have the dissension among the elite class, I wanted to point out, where you can find some that will help and work in your behalf. We have another one where we have the Egyptians, or the foreign power, or the foreigners, and the antagonism between the stranger or the Israelites and the foreigners. And Moses stood up to resist them. Now there's something else, is the dissension among the people, their own kinsmen. There is a dissension. And it's not only a dissension that when Moses tried to make peace, he is antagonized by, who do you think you are to tell us what to do? All right, so these are all of the elements that we got to deal with, isn't it? Maybe. It depends on what you follow. See, if you follow religion, you ain't got to deal with this much at all. You could just walk away from this. You can see two people fight, you can just sum it up, man, you know, tell them you don't want to hear it, you just walk away. You're really not your concern, because God gonna take care of you one day. He's either gonna rapture you, or you're gonna flee off in the wilderness, wait till Jesus come in the clouds, and then you're gonna meet him in the air and all this other stuff. So you don't really have nothing else. You don't really have to get too involved in that. But if you are coming to what Moses was dealing with, that, listen, we got to get enough people in order, because God's gonna come in the next chapter and begin to tell Moses, you got to make an exodus. And Moses knew it wasn't just going to be just a couple of them that's going to leave. It just won't be him and his brother, right? That's why ain't nobody going to believe me. So what did he have to do? He had to go teach people to believe that God have come, right? But you know what comes along with that? God have come to do what? What have he come to do? See, this goes back into our discussion about heaven and why people ought to walk righteously now. For what? Why should I walk righteously now, today? Well, you will live forever. To do what? What's the plan? What's the goal? Where are you taking me to? The clouds? What is it? As I said before, what's the incentive? So what was behind Moses' argument and bringing it to the people and showing these signs and going before Pharaoh? While he's going before Pharaoh to let the people go, he's also trying to persuade the people that it is time to go. Verse 15, now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. So he was exiled for a while. Now notice this. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, how is it that you are come so soon today? And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock. And he said unto his daughters, and where is he? Why is it that ye have left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread. Moses content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses Zipporah his daughter, and she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom. For he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land, in exile. But even in another land is showing the character of Moses. What Moses is doing? He's standing for the weak. That's another characteristic of Moses. He's standing for the weak. That's what he did when he killed the Egyptian. Stood for the weak. He had mercy upon him. He had compassion upon him. Just like what the master said in Matthew, the 23rd chapter. Judgment, mercy, and faith. He's drawing this from the prophets. These are the fundamentals of anyone who's going to make a move like Moses made. But then there's a greater movement taking place, more than the land of Canaan. There's a movement to seize upon an entire planet. And that was started by Yahushua of Nazareth. And just as Moses had to go and convince the people that the time is now. Is that what Moses had to do? Now, notice this. He named his son Gershom, a stranger in a strange land, verse 23. And it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage. And they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage. And God heard their groanings. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. Why would the groanings conjure up the memory? Is it because he just favored Israel? Or is it not only did he favor Israel, but he's also responding on why he called Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to eliminate the socioeconomic conditions that caused the groanings in the first place. See, it's not just Israel. It's the entire condition that's causing Israel to groan. That's why he called Abraham anyway. And now this condition, in which he hated from the very foundations of the world, now this affliction is, because of this condition, this affliction is upon the children of Abraham. And now it's time. And I remember why I called him, and I will proceed further with the plan. The world continues in its injustices, so now I will move forward with the plan, and I will call forth this people out of the land of bondage and servitude. He heard their groanings. Verse 25, and God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. Now he looked upon them and he understood. Now you understand, is he bringing them out of Egypt? Now we're going to read, as he brings them out of Egypt, is he bringing them out of Egypt simply because they're Israelites? Or is he bringing them out of Egypt because of the promise he made to Abraham that you shall raise up a nation that will bring justice and judgment in the world?
Hallelujah. That's it. That's the reason.
So they have to eradicate these conditions that's making them groan anyway. Now, I had asked the question. We're going to look into the next chapter next week, but I'm asking the question here. I said, look, will Moses now be called to go make the people ready? See, I'm not going to get into this chapter because I want to take my time in the next one. But see, he's going to try to get out of it, isn't he? See, I don't speak well. He was afraid. He was scared. Why would they listen to me? He didn't want to do it. But then if you fast forward 2,000 years later, the Messiah, as a type of voice of God, as a type of the burning bush, spoke unto his 12 disciples and said, go, harvest is plenty. Is that what he said? He said harvest plenty, but the labor is what? Few. And then he said, do what now? Go, feed my sheep. Go tend to the harvest. And after he told them to go do that, first when he was telling them to do it, this is what you got to be prepared for. He had to give them another jump start because they went back fishing. They didn't want to do it. You see the trend? You really don't want to do it. Now, Haggai was the same thing. The governors heard the voice of the prophet Haggai. He came down to Zerubbabel. He came down to Joshua. He came down to the governors and the leaders. And he pronounced a word to the governors and leaders and said, listen, how is it that y'all stand in y'all houses, y'all sealed houses, and the house of God is a wreck? I'm going to tell you, unless you come do my work, I'm going to blow upon your pockets. Why? Because they didn't want to go do it. Go do what? People ask Brother Judah, go do what? You have to go open up the gates of Zion. Now, how do you go open up the gates of Zion? Well, the reason why I say open up the gates of Zion, because the gates of Zion were closed by way of the scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees. And that way was closed because they took away the keys. And on that key ring are the keys of knowledge. So to enter into it, you have to give the people knowledge. Joshua told his disciples to go teach men, baptizing them in my name. Go give them knowledge to do what? Partake in this work. For what? To go take the land. This time it just isn't Canaan though, is it? He already taught them in the mountains, you shall inherit the earth. So it was the same thing that with Moses. That was a small thing. See, that old covenant, if we think that old covenant was glorious, this one is most glorious. See, that old covenant was built upon, you just go get the land of Canaan right now. But he had to go prepare them and go teach them, go take it. They didn't want to take it. And how much resistance did they give? Now, after they heard Moses, they ran. They went off into they're moving forward. Now they run to the Red Sea. So that let us know that in the process of time, we're going to have difficulties. You're going to run into difficulties that look like they downright cannot be moved. So the equivalent of the mountain, and Messiah said, if you have faith that could be moved, to me, it's just like that Red Sea. What sea divides ever? But we see that they can be moved. Fear. What do we do? God said, why are y'all crying to me? Have faith. And that's what he was explaining. Have faith and move forward. Where are you going to? You're going to take the land. Why? Because I'm going to eradicate out of the world, completely, what caused you to be groaning anyway? You are a tool and an instrument to remove it. And it is resistance all along the way. So they were afraid, but they made it through that water. Then they got into the wilderness. Here, now go spy out the land. I've given it to you. He sent more out. I'm giving you a little briefing as we read forward. I want you to keep this with you. Now he sent out 12 spies. You mean to tell me 10 out of 12 of them come back with a bad report? Not that the land wasn't good. See, we don't say that taking this earth and possessing this earth, we don't say that's bad. That's a great idea. So it's the same thing in the land of Canaan. Oh, the land is beautiful, but there is a problem. There are Canaanites there. They're huge. We are like grasshoppers before them. And what do we say today? God said, go take the planet. And what do we say? No, they got nuclear bombs. They got cameras. They got drones. We can't do this. Look at their infrastructure. It's impossible. Then I tell you, go take the land. That's why he said, listen, the fearful and the unbelieving, they can't get it. See, did the fearful or the unbelieving receive the land of Canaan? No, they didn't make it. They didn't get it. They didn't have the courage. So Moses had to teach them what to do. Moses had to teach them and articulate to them these laws and statutes so they can understand the socio-economic policies to put in place. They began to understand. They had to come in their spirit to understand what would bring it about and what it would produce. And he would give them a glimpse of what it produced. No one would be hungry. Your stores would be packed. I mean, rain, everything, fruitful hills and mountains. He gave them a description of heaven. And after that description, time to go take the land, they were scared. And I understand. And I could go, and we could always talk back and make the children of Israel look afraid. But 2020, hindsight, but then I look at it right now. Do I have the courage? Do I have the courage to move forward with something like this? That I can perish in battle. I can be locked up in chains. I could be thrown into the prisons. And the master said, yeah, that's a part of it. See, but we all been waiting though. See, we've been waiting for the Inquisition, for the Pope to come around and throw everybody into prison because you're not keeping the Sabbath day. Or we've been waiting for the Pope to come around and start the Great Tribulation. And then when that comes, everybody flee. And they're going to fall because, they're going to believe him because he's going to cause this stuff to happen and this to happen. And then you get somebody that don't have much of an education come and tell you that already started. And he's looking at you like, what in the world you talking about? But I believe if you really start to study and learn, you will begin to realize that I've already started. And what we have to realize is that now there's a job, and if our righteousness exceed the scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees, then we know we will be compelled to organize and to confront the mountains of brass. That's what we'll be forced to do. That's what our conscience will force us to do. Now, we will be going into Egypt, a historical background of Egypt, what Moses is about to enter into, and why they're groaning. So we see the groanings. That is in association with chapter 1, the treasure cities. Now we see the groanings. Moses will be called to deliver them out of that. Same thing with the Messiah. He's seen the groanings of the children of Israel. He came down to deliver them. And just as Moses didn't operate alone, Yeshua didn't operate alone. And that call continues to this day. But like the prophet Isaiah said, who have believed our report? Who believe it? Okay? Who believes it? So our righteousness must exceed the rights of the scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees. And I want us to make this parallel little by little on what Moses have done and what Yeshua have done and how it falls into our lap as well to continue the work of the fathers. And the work of the fathers will not be completed and done until every Canaanite is removed out of the land. Do you know it's still Canaanites in the land?
Yeah, what course?
They all over the place, ain't they? In fact, since the Israelites have fallen into captivity, the Canaanites have increased everywhere. But the decree is still the same from the foundations, that the Canaanites must be removed. That's right, the merchants. They must be removed. And it was the merchants I'm talking about today. That merchant said he wanted to open up a market And I said it before, and I want you to understand, and I want you to think about what he said. He want to open up a market for the pharmaceutical companies. That's what he said. Now, without being an idealist, and you're looking at it as a material, as we say, material dialectic, right? That means, what do that look like real time? If you're going to open up a market for pharmaceuticals, then that means you have to provide sick people.
Right. Exactly.
That's what that means. So they don't care. They asking, well, what? Look at your side effects. Because they've got side effects already for people who already just voluntarily took the test. He was all over the place. Couldn't even explain. Well, there was some. Well, we're still testing it. And, but Visor, he's there. He always do something with his hands when he's talking to. He's just a real strange fellow, this Bill Gates. I'm strange too, but Bill Gates strange. He's strange. And so he never did answer the questions. But I did learn I think Visor is getting 1.9 billion to produce the pharmaceutical. Then there's another one who's getting 909 something million just to make it. And then they're able to sell it at profit. Canaanites. They got to be removed out of the land. And here it is, the Canaanites have got aggressive. And now they want to come. Now, do we wait? If it's nothing we can do, it's nothing we can do. You just fall in the battle. But it's something else if you could win. It's something else if you stand up and fight. You could walk the plank. What's the use of walking the plank? Right? If they gonna throw you off anyway, why walk to it? Right. You're gonna have to earn throwing me off the plank. Right. You're gonna have to earn this one. And you better do it well, because you might get pulled right off with me, because I just can't walk the plank like that. You just can't do it that way, right? They got to earn it. And guess what? You know what I'm saying? Hold on to his next shirt, a couple of them, because I want to bring a couple of them with me. And it might wind up being that they the only ones who going to fall into the ditch. And he have did that to Hitler and Mussolini and the rest of them. That's how he worked. But we have to realize how he works, and we got to get there. The world is waiting for the true servants of God to rise up, because it's something that they must do this day. We can't sit down here and wait for all these other people running around, Black Lives Matter and all this other stuff. No. Let us not do that. We don't wait for the Democrats and all of that. We have work to do, and we got to learn how to do this stuff, okay? So this will be the law reading for today. We're just doing the law reading for this evening. I didn't get it because my transpo, so I wasn't able to get. I was still gonna try to go around and spy something out, but today I was just saying at least we could do a table or something just to get it going. If people want to go out,
where you want to go?
We could go look for something, or just go to the default spot.
What's the default, brother? Bidwell.
Bidwell, that's the default.
They're waiting for you to come out here.
That's the default.
That's going to give people a sense of normalcy.
Yes, the sense of normalcy.
Yeah. Whatever normal.
So we're going to go out there for a little bit just to test it, see what it looks like. Actually, once we set up, we could probably, if a couple people can man the table in the meantime, we could set up and go look just to get an idea. But I'm thinking, because I'm not sure them boys are there every week, but I'm thinking at Bailey Delavan, because there's 2 parking lots, probably public parking lots, where they probably won't bother us. But I want to be around a plaza, some kind of a square where it's constant traffic, and it's not much of that. You know what I'm saying? So not only do you have not just driving traffic, but foot traffic. So you want both of those.
Yeah, it's right in our community.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
Yeah. And especially we do the speaker when we come out with the speaker, because it's just loud, just period. So we go out with the speaker, so we could go look at them and see what it looks like during this time of the day. Is just want to take a swing by, but because it started to die down a little bit, of course. But we could take a look at it, and then we could schedule next time for that area. Because anywhere else, like the Fillmore area, is not much traffic. You get driving traffic, but you don't get much foot traffic because there's nowhere to go.
That's right.
So it's like wherever stores are, That's where you're normally gonna see most of the foot traffic. So we're gonna in the meantime, while we're getting things together, we will open it up for questions or comments. If anyone have any questions or comments. But we're gonna conclude the law reading for today.
A general community question as far as when you guys set up.
Mhm.
And here, I mean, we don't hear a lot about Buffalo, but do we have any kind of issues with like, with the law interfering with you guys setting up within the city, or is it?
I haven't researched the law thoroughly, but from experience, we have been approached by police, but they wasn't able to do. They didn't. They let it.
Not really harassing.
They couldn't. Right. They wouldn't harass. They just want to make sure we wasn't selling anything, because we would need a peddler's license. And the other time we was approached is because where we were stationed. We were stationed like on an island, and it interfered with traffic. So they just asked us to move to the side. But for that being known, seeing that they didn't have nothing else, so I figure they don't have much to say at this moment.
It's really easy to demonstrate in areas that are considered public parks.
Yes.
Spaces, communal spaces, garden
Yes.
spaces are all really good spaces
To
to
set up.
demonstration and information.
Like I wouldn't mind going in front of City Hall. It's just not. It's not enough traffic there on a weekend.
No, it's not, hardly any.
During a weekday, you have some traffic, but not really on the weekend.
If you went down there, you would have to go
Probably Greyhound.
That one district I've called.
either that, or you would have to be willing to
You
probably wouldn't have nowhere to set up, but really like that Chippewa, anywhere between there.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah,
anywhere between like Delaware
Yeah.
to Maine.
yeah. Where all of the restaurants and
Yeah,
all
because
the
now you
traffic.
got a whole bunch of people who actually